Good afternoon, you're very welcome back to the channel. This is an old abandoned road. I'm going to go a walk along it here and we're going to enjoy the fall view here in Northern Ireland in autumn 2024. In 4 days the UK budget is coming out. The government have promised much hardship in that same budget to secure the public finances. So come on with me as I chat you through some of the expected changes from my opinion. We're in the middle of County Down. Ballynahinch is just up that way, and if we were to continue down this road hundreds of years ago, this would have been the old Belfast road. So come on with me as we enjoy the views and I share some of my thoughts on what's going to happen in this upcoming budget. I've never shared this on the channel, but it is an area that I somewhat work in. I'm interested in taxes and investments. The purpose of this video is more for informational purposes, for education purposes, and maybe even entertainment as well. But it is certainly not to be taken as financial advice. So what is coming up in the upcoming budget in 4 days' time that's going to affect us in Northern Ireland and also in Great Britain and the mainland? So the UK budget, Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are implementing their new budget under the Labour government, and they say that they've inherited a disastrously bad and perilous financial situation. They want to shore up the UK economy. So essentially what this budget is, as they've been promised, is it's a cash grab to pay for all the things that Labour and everyone else want. What are one of the first things that could happen is that there are individual savings accounts, or better known as ISAs. If you're watching from the US, that is your equivalent of a Roth IRA, not an acronym to be confused. In Northern Ireland is something very different, but the equivalent in the US is a Roth IRA. Here in the UK we have got ISAs. The limit at the moment is £20,000. Essentially that's a post-tax asset that you can put your money in after you've been taxed from your wages or salary or anything else, and then the growth or the bank interest or the dividends or the capital gains in that is tax-free. It's currently sitting about £20,000. The government may want to significantly reduce future contributions there, and it means anything else you would hold outside of an ISA, and unfortunately, even though you've been taxed on it from your income, you would have to pay capital gains or dividend tax on the earnings from that. That's very, very sad, and is not an incentive to savers under the ISA scheme. What else might happen? Well, capital gains could be dramatically shot up from the current around 20% to match income. So if you go to work and you earn over £50,000, you're blessed to earn over £50,000, you're going to pay income tax, or if you look at your pay slip, it could be PAYE, and you could be paying anywhere up to 40%. Even if you're earning over 100 grand, it goes to 60%. I know it doesn't on the tax slip, but it does with your personal allowance that's taken away. So essentially capital gains would be a jump up to match what you're paying from your salary and income. And you ask the question, why is that fair? Well, firstly, any gain you've made on something that you've bought after tax, why should you pay tax on it? And that's a very, very good point, and it's not something I agree is a good incentive to people who are trying to accumulate wealth, maybe buying investment properties, investing in the stock market, and then when they come to realize the gain, they would be taxed at a much, much higher rate than what they have been in the past. And I think that's very unfair. As well, the government may look at already pushing down the capital gains exemption. So if you had some shares and you wanted to sell those shares, a few years ago you could sell up to £12,000 and never pay any tax on the gain, but now it's down to £3,000. The government may want to reduce that further, although it's so low I can't see them doing that. The government also will be looking at increasing inheritance tax. So if you die and you're blessed enough to have a large estate, you would pay more than 40 from the state taken. You would pay 40% at the moment. That could be increased 45%, 50%, 60%. Again, not a good thing. At the moment, inheritance tax is only payable on an estate larger than £325,000 per person. So if you're married, that would jump to 650,000. And if you pass your primary residential home onto your children, there's also a relief for that as well. The government, I would suggest it's a safe bet that they will dramatically reduce those exemptions. If you're a higher rate taxpayer and you don't want to pay 40% of what you earn after 50 grand, many people have been wise to invest that in a pension, the amount over their £50,000, and they have been claiming higher rate tax relief now for quite a long time. Again, the government essentially want us to do this because if you're looking at the future, there probably won't be much of a welfare system in 20 to 30 years' time, looking at the birth rate and looking at how the UK economy and society is going to go. So what the government have been trying to do over the last wee while is to push personal accountability and responsibility to people to save and invest for their future. But the government will probably, in terms of seeking their cash grab, reduce the relief for higher rate earners and reduce the incentive for pension incentive, essentially putting money in from your salary over 50k. That would be another sad thing. At the moment, if you have a pension, you can take 25% out of it when you go to retire as a lump sum. That's tax free. That will probably be significantly reduced as well. What else could happen? Well, this was announced, I see it on the BBC this morning, that employers' national insurance, so essentially if you're working a job, for the privilege of employing you, your employer has to pay a tax of employers' national insurance of 13.8%. It was 15% a while ago, but now it's 13.8%. The Labour government will almost start, well, I think they've alluded to this, you can just see the road above me here, they've alluded to this, that they want to make employers pay more for our NHS and other public services, but there's so much wastage, you'd want them to fix that first before taking taxes. I would suggest that will dramatically increase from 13.8% to something much more. Well, you may say as an employee, that's bad. Doesn't affect me. That's bad for the employer, but not for me. I don't care. Problem is, if the government makes it harder to employ people and they're more expensive to employ, they'll want to employ less people and give them smaller salary rises because they don't want to pay the national insurance on that. It always comes back when taxes are put on the big businesses and employers. It does come back to hit the employee. What else might happen? Well, entrepreneurial relief is currently sitting at about 10%. There's an umbrella up there. I wonder, has that been forgotten, or is that there for when you get soaked walking on this old Belfast road? Entrepreneurial relief is sitting at about 10%. Quite a generous tax rate, to be frank. But the whole thing is, a country's wealth is generated by entrepreneurial skill. It's not generated by services that the government produces. It's produced. A country's wealth is generated by what people in the country can generate, maybe what they can export or the services that they can fulfill. People who start businesses need an incentive to work hard at their businesses, and eventually when they want to sell it, it should be incentivized to hold on to their business and to pay a much lower rate of tax than other people who are working as part of their job, but at the end of the day they're doing a role, but they're not taking the risk. They're not putting capital, or they're not putting their own mortgages and their own family finances on the line, as to what sole traders and businesses who have started trying to generate wealth and trying to employ people, create jobs, create wealth for the country. And there really should be an incentive for entrepreneurs. The current low tax percentage rate will probably be dramatically increased for entrepreneurial relief. If you wanted to know what it looks like on the main road here, I'm just walking up. See all the traffic. We'll walk back here, and we'll finish the conversation. Hopefully I haven't bored you. I do think it is interesting, especially if you're watching from the United Kingdom, and hopefully you can enjoy the walk on this old abandoned road. So entrepreneurial relief will probably be attacked by the government here in 4 days. What else will happen? This is possibly one of the things in the entire budget, and especially the Conservatives did this as well. So I can't just say the Conservatives are amazing and everything, because they aren't. The Conservatives over the last few years have been freezing personal allowances. So essentially you don't pay income tax on the first £12,500 of what you earn. And that is fair, because for lower paid workers you should expect to hold on to most of what you generate. But unfortunately inflation has been rampant, and every time you earn more, you essentially need to get a pay rise every year to offset against inflation, or your bargaining power and your discretionary income will dramatically decrease. There's a big drop here. And the personal allowances have been frozen at £12,500 for quite a long time. But the problem with that is, as bread and everything else becomes much more expensive, their purchasing power is dramatically reduced. And what should happen is personal allowances should increase in line with inflation. So because the personal allowance has not increased, the media has labelled this a stealth tax, and that's a fair comment to say, because essentially it is. If you get a salary increase, or the nation gets a merit increase of say 5% a year, really the personal allowance should be going up by the same amount. Otherwise they're worse off than what they were the previous year. What else would happen? There's a few other things. I'll fly through these now. Dividend tax is a tax on income from shares held in companies. It's sitting at about 9% for basic rate, 33% for higher rate, and 39% for the top rate. Those rates will probably be increased like the capital gains tax. There's dividend exemption, although recently the dividend exemption was reduced quite dramatically from £2,000 to £1,000, and now I believe it's at £500. So you can only earn £500 a year tax-free from shares that you've worked hard to buy, that you really can't gain much on. So you can only earn up to £500 a year tax-free. It used to be £2,000 and more. And then obviously there have been some other things in the news recently with regards to the government going after non-dom individuals, i.e. their tax residency and domicile is assigned to another nation, and therefore they don't pay as much UK tax as perhaps they should or ought to. And then what is very popular, which could backfire on the government, is that the government want to introduce VAT on private education. So if you send your kids, if you've got the money to send your kids to private school because you think that the public schools are not quite good enough, then the government are now going to be introducing a tax on you working hard after your taxation has been taken from your salary or wages, and the money that you're putting to send your kid to the private school, you're going to have to pay 20% more on that. And I know a lot of people who maybe do, we think of, when we say private school, we think of Eton and we think of other schools that tend to dominate the political sphere of the UK. You can think of Jacob Rees-Mogg and many other people in the Tory government, and indeed Labour, who had the privilege of going to private schools that actually run the country. But the problem is, much of private schooling and that sector is filled of kids whose parents scrimped and saved and did without themselves for those parents to have they had a desire to send their kids to something more than what they felt the government could provide. Don't want to get into a political show about that one, but that's been well covered in the media. So I've kind of run through in a very different video to what I normally produce on my channel, going through the UK budget changes that I believe are going to take place in the next 4 days. There's not much time to do anything about it, but I thought you might find it interesting. It's always fascinating to think about what the government will do. To be honest, I am really not a fan of over taxation. I'm a free market guy. I really believe strongly in the fact that the government should very much stay out of people's lives as much as they can. I believe in small g government, I believe in personal accountability because of the wastage of taxation on the public sector. Hope you've enjoyed the video. It's very different to what I normally produce. If you've enjoyed it, please do comment below about what I can do in the future that you would enjoy on the channel. If you've enjoyed the video, you've come across it, this is your first time, please do subscribe to the channel for more. Over and out from the old abandoned road between Belfast and Ballynahinch. I hope you have a wonderful day. Please do subscribe to the channel for more. Over and out.